Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore concepts that allow us to broaden our view of the world. You'll hear interesting topics, meet fascinating guests, and discover who you really are. Using the time-tested practices of astrology, you'll learn how to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Astrology, art, and spiritual adventure on Turning of the Wheel TV with Chris Flisher. Hey, welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher, and you know this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. I got a great adventure today to go on with my good friend Hazel Dixon-Cooper, who's calling in all the way from Fresno. And she's on the other side of the universe practically, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects in astrology. And we're going to have her on, and she's going to be talking about, she's a very well-known author. She's written several books. She's most noted for Born on a Rotten Day. What could be a better title for a book? Everybody thinks they're born on a rotten day, but some people actually are. And hopefully it's not one of you. But anyway, Hazel is here. She's also got a brand new book out called Astrology's Bad Boy and How to Handle this particular planet that we're going to be talking about today. The planet I'm referring to that we're talking about today is Pluto. And the reason Pluto is important is because astronomers think of Pluto as a non-planet. But there's not an astrologer on the face of this universe who doesn't believe in the power of Pluto. Pluto is the most feared in some way and most highly regarded planet in our whole astrology tool bag, so to speak. And so it's great to have Hazel on. Hazel, welcome to Turning of the Wheel. It's great to have you on, calling from far away to talk to me today.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I'm
it's great
enjoying being here with you.
This is fun. We feel like we're on the cutting edge of technology here. So listen, let me ask you, what's your view on Pluto? Do you like Pluto or do you hate Pluto?
I love Pluto. Pluto's a little scary.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of gets a bad rap with throughout astrology because he is considered kind of a heavy-duty, heavy-hitting planet. But I really like Pluto because if you work with that energy, as you know, Chris,
yeah,
you can transform your life.
You certainly
with
can.
That planet.
Yeah, I always think of Pluto, the way I analogize Pluto is I think of it like sort of like having Pluto come in to remodel your kitchen. And when Pluto comes in to your house, he pulls the sink out, he pulls the stove out. You're sitting there eating takeout food for the next 4 or 5, 6, 7 weeks or whatever till the carpenter comes back in and fixes your house. And you're there, gosh, what was I thinking? But when all that turmoil is done and that upset is done, and you sit back and you look at it, you say, wow, this was worth it. That's sort of how I view Pluto. Is that pretty accurate to you, too?
Yes, actually, absolutely. Pluto turns up a lot of inner work that we need to do so our souls can evolve.
Yeah.
And we have, sometimes when Pluto switches signs or is going through a transit, you can have kind of a cataclysmic event happen in your life that really, I call it like a chain yanking event.
Yeah.
But other times it's a slow progression for most of us, then changing the way that we should change, getting rid of those negative behaviors and getting rid of outdated or misconceptions that we have of ourselves that maybe we learned in childhood.
Right.
And Pluto is the planet that kind of clears all that garbage away if we work with that energy. And then, our souls were put here to evolve and to change and to grow. And Pluto's the planet that kind of pushes that along. Sometimes he pushes it along with a Mack truck, but he still, he pushes this along, and we're supposed to work and so we can grow, both as humans and as soul creatures.
It certainly is the case. And one of the things I've often noticed about Pluto as an astrological component is that if you don't pay attention to Pluto, he will make you pay attention, right?
Absolutely. Pluto does not go away.
He doesn't suffer fools.
That is the nag that is always in your head. No.
Yeah, he doesn't suffer fools gladly, so you've got to pay attention. And
no.
The best way to know about Pluto is actually to have your chart done. Have your chart done professionally by a professional astrologer and see where it is in your chart when you were born. And then you'll have a very good idea of what Pluto can provide for you in the course of your life. This is an astrological component that is incredibly accurate. And if you are aware of it, you can do very well with regard to minimizing its impact or acting to it. Because really what it does, the whole point of the astrology chart, Hazel, is really to work on our liabilities and you know, and celebrate our assets, I guess, right? And I think Pluto is one of those planets.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, when you
Pluto,
think,
when you know where Pluto was as a child
yeah,
in your natal chart, you can work with that energy to overcome some maybe negative messages that you received as a child,
right,
or misconceptions about yourself, or to understand that the feelings that you have, we're all born with good instincts.
right,
And those instincts can somehow get skewed, you know, either benignly or not so benignly in our lives. And Pluto is the planet that helps us return to those inner feelings and inner instincts and bring them out to where we can work with them and put aside some of the negative voices in our head. You know,
yeah,
that negative thing in your head that says you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, and etc.
yeah. It's hard work, but the rewards are there. I think we think of Pluto as the great reconstructor. I think, you know, sort of a very transformative planet. You know, it's got that strong you know, Scorpio energy about it, and it really is about redemption and rebuilding. And you know, the thing is that, you know, it's interesting because we're seeing it in the United States right now. Pluto in the chart of the United States is going through what's called its first house. And Pluto was, you know, when the United States was born, the United States has a chart, July 4th, 1776 at 5:08 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, no less. And that chart has Pluto, and Pluto is now doing a number on the United States in some ways. So we look at it in that regard too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Pluto in Capricorn is in the first house, is, you know, your identity, self. Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing here? Why? It's a whole identity crisis, and I think the United States is going through that right now. And Pluto is kind of the guy that churns up, you know, Capricorn's tradition and status quo and power and do as I tell you to do. Don't, you know, do as I do, not as do as I say, not as I do type of planet, sun sign.
Yeah.
And Pluto is the guy that comes along and says, oh no, we're going to dig all this up and throw it right in your face and then see what happens.
Yeah. So as I said,
Pluto's after the truth.
Yeah,
Pluto is the planet of truth. And sometimes that can be a brutal truth. It can be personally hard to take and certainly hard to take for a country, especially a country that's been a leading country in the world since it was founded.
Right. But it's interesting. I think everything has a cycle to it. This is, you know, part of the whole process of maturation. You know, the United States is really a fairly young country. When you look at the other planets in the globe, it's a fairly young country. You know, 200-something years old, and we have a lot to learn, obviously. And this is what the great lesson is. But Pluto in the individual's chart, in your personal chart, everybody has a Pluto in their chart. We all have all 10 planets in our astrology charts. These are the planets at the time of birth where they were positioned in your astrology chart. When you know that, you can see how to best to use Pluto to your advantage, because it really does have a mighty power to it. It can be incredible. You know, you can move mountains when you have the power of Pluto behind you, bringing you a wide array of talents and skill sets that sometimes just need to be awakened, and they have been dormant in your life for some time, and then all of a sudden there comes a point in your time when you're ready to sort of step up, then there you go. And you've got that major reawakening. But you do come out at the other end of the day, at the end of the Pluto transit, a sort of a wiser, happier person, if not somewhat, you know, humble. I think humble's a good word. Don't you? Yeah, it's got a real sense of, there's a sense of humility, I think is the right word, only because of the fact that it has it brings you down, it cuts you down to size. And that's the most, yeah, it's the most important.
Pluto does not let you get away with anything.
So when you think of it, how have you used it in your life? And how do you advise people to use it?
Well, Pluto is you know, as I see the transits as I've really been studying Pluto for many years and seeing the transits in my own life, that I think that when you have to be mindful of what's going on in your life. You can't just walk through on autopilot like most of us do.
Yeah.
You know, I say, good morning, how are you? I'm fine. We don't stop and think about things.
That's a good
point. But I see Pluto working in my life personally is it also, he kind of throws things in my face that are my bad habits. I run into other people that have these bad habits.
Right.
And have these, like, I'm a procrastinator. Okay, by nature, I've always been, if
Join
it's
the
a
club.
deadline, I'm on the deadline, but I'm on the deadline at 12 o'clock and the thing is due at 6 o'clock in the morning, you
Right,
know?
right.
So I had some Pluto lessons in having to work with people, a couple of people who were worse procrastinators. They were like the procrastinators from the Black Lagoon, you know? They were the worst people in the world about not getting things done. And then that kind of finally kicked me into gear, saying, oh yeah, you know, I have this trait myself. And it helped me get more organized in my professional life and in my personal life.
So it sort of heightens your awareness.
Pluto has that habit of throwing, you know, there's a saying that we meet people, the things that we don't like in other people are often our bad habits.
Yes, very true.
And that is a Pluto,
Yeah.
you know, one of his little tricks that he likes to throw at you.
Yeah. No, it's funny because it's really an unusual sort of situation because we can't really do much about it, and you know it's there to. I'm got an interesting call here, so just hang on, folks, and I'll be right with you. Okay, we're doing Skype, so Skype obviously has its flaws to it, but you know if it weren't for Skype, I wouldn't be able to talk to someone like Hazel on the West Coast. So it's really vital that I have this opportunity because otherwise we wouldn't have this chance. But what I was saying was that Pluto really helps to raise your awareness, and it is a very critical part of that part. And by raising your awareness, like you said, when you meet somebody that you don't like, you don't get along with, it has that moment in it that sort of says, wow, it really wakes you up. It makes you very aware. And I think that's one of the best things about it.
Yes, absolutely. Pluto's like a really tough therapist. He tries to drag the truth out of us.
Yeah, right.
And because this is all inner work, you have to be, and because Pluto's transits are so long,
right?
You know, his transits are from anywhere from 12 to 25 years or longer. This is a long, slow process of transformation where you can really make permanent changes in your life.
Right. Yeah, that's a critical piece of it because you know it does the sense of raising your awareness is critical. First of all, it's a very key piece. I think running into people who sort of push you in ways that you don't like to be pushed is a very apropos kind of concept for Pluto, because it raises your awareness to the point where you have to sort of look at yourself and change your own behavior in order to adapt to that. And if you don't adapt to it, you're going to go repeat that lesson over and over again, it seems.
Yes, that is so true. And also, we have free will as human beings. You know, we can stay stuck and mired in these old issues and problems and relationships or whatever that keep going around and around and replaying throughout our lives. Yeah. Or we have the choice to open our eyes and see what our part in drawing this negative energy to us is and starting to change it. And Pluto, that force that also pushes you and nags you or may, you know, feel like you hit a wall at 90 miles an hour in a car, also will give you the strength to go through these issues and change them and find your voice, find the ability to say no, find a way to stand up for yourself and change yourself if you work with that energy.
Right. And some of this work that we're talking about is not always fun, which is part of the process. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, having your kitchen remodeled is not a lot of fun, especially if the heart of your house is ripped out and you're trying to go on with your life. So that's a very humorous analogy for what Pluto's like. But many people go through serious things as a result of what's called a Pluto transit. And when I refer to a Pluto transit, what that means is that, for those of you who don't know, we have a static chart that we're born with at our birth. That remains with us all the way through our life. It's like a fingerprint, like our DNA. It's always there. But then that's a static chart. But then when we enter into the world of today, the planets are moving every day. And when they do that move, when they move, they have an influence on us. And that's what Hazel and I are talking about today, is that influence, that move. And so when you see that happening, you might look back and say, wow, that was a wild and crazy 12 years I just went through. And then when you're done with it, you look back and you say, wow, that was something else. And if you get a good astrologer that knows their stuff, they will point out to you when that was, and you will have a moment that says, wow, that is exactly right. I remember going through that period of time in my life, and it was pure agony to go through that because it was so egregious and such a difficult, tempestuous time. Now, I'm not trying to elicit fear here because it isn't always about horrendous, the sky is falling. There's plenty of times when it simply just means good, old-fashioned, hard elbow grease work to get things done. If you're trying to start a new business or you're trying to build a family, sometimes those things you sort of crank up this kind of potential influence and make us very aware of it. And that's when you can find out with a real practiced astrologer, which is one of the things that I find so fascinating about astrology. Have you had many clients, Hazel, who have had serious or have had real revelations as a result of Pluto?
I have. I've had several people that I worked with recently have been kind of astounded about when they, when I point out to them where Pluto is operating in their lives and
Right.
where in the past, the bumps that they've come through. And you can kind of pinpoint that. And it was astounding to me too. When I see, we're like, I think astrologers are like doctors.
Yeah.
You have a hard time treating yourself because you don't take your own advice all the time.
That's very
And
true.
to see where Pluto works in your life can be a real revelation. And most of the time, as you said, Chris, it isn't these huge upheavals. Your house doesn't fall down around your ears and you don't get in a car accident or something like that. It's this constant pressure, this inner pressure that comes and goes and comes and goes, and that I have, why am I here? What is my destiny? What is my purpose? What am I doing? I need to do something more than I'm doing now, and whatever it is, personally, professionally, whatever it is, it's that inner voice, that inner nag that won't go away. And that's kind of the Pluto influence pushing you to open your eyes. You do have a way to, you have someplace else that you can go, something you can do that will help you live a better life.
So in many ways, it can be viewed as a great, like a mentor, sort of a cosmic mentor who really guides you to be all that you can be. It's sort of like that old phrase, be all that you can be. And it has that quality to it because it brings you to a space and time after you've gone through it where you say, wow, this is really where I should have been all along. And I've had clients, when I've done astrology readings, who have gone through a Pluto transit and they are in a completely different place than where they started. And yet, when you look at the natal birth chart of that individual, they actually are where they're supposed to be based on where the chart is at the time and based on where Pluto is in their chart natally. It's just that they had to go through a sort of a couple of detours in order to get there. Many of us, we grow up with the expectation, we go to college, we have children, we have houses, we have wives and all this other stuff, and they become major distractions in a very good way, by the way, but they become distractions to us, and sometimes our true life's purpose doesn't always come to us until later. And many times, I always think of the individual as a sort of like a cuckoo clock filled with wheels that are spinning at different rates. And then all of a sudden, when they all click into place, the cuckoo clock comes out and you've arrived. And we see this in many different famous people. We see people who hit their peak when they're very young, someone like a Michael Jackson, who was 4 or 5 years old on stage in the Ed Sullivan Show. And then you look at other people who didn't hit their peak until very, very late in life. But I think Pluto is largely responsible for bringing that person to that spot. And I'm wondering if you see that the same way.
I do, absolutely do. And Pluto also is a great planet for making us reconcile or trying to reconcile and balance our lives of who we are personally, privately, where we live a life on the surface if we are people who are out in the public, and all of us are to a certain extent. You're in the public when you go to work or to church or go to your job. You're out with other people and your friends, and that goes all the way up to celebrity, and balancing that with who you are at home. And Pluto is a great leveler of that.
I'll say. Yeah.
And I just, this thing that's coming up with Bill Cosby right now.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend about it and thought, that sounds like a 10th house Pluto transit. I looked up his chart online, and Pluto is transiting his 10th house right now.
Yep.
And that's really public and private lives, all things that have come up. And this is not saying that he's guilty of anything. It's just saying there is something that has been brought up. It's really a harsh thing for him. I think Pluto just moved into his 10th house a few months ago, maybe less than a year ago, and he's got this huge, this would be like a cataclysmic bump for him.
Yeah,
and,
no, it certainly is. Yeah.
That is something that was not settled, or it was put away, but not really.
Never rectified, never resolved. Yeah, never
wasn't finished. Yeah. And it's something that he's had to deal with again.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
Whitney Houston, when she was trying her comeback and unfortunately got, into her drugs again, her Pluto was transiting her 12th house or 10th house too. That is, again, public and private life.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very real. These are the sort of events that we typically see. Now, they're not always this dire, and they're not always this severe, but they do have a quality of them that is very profound and leaves an impact. I think the one word that I think of most when I think of Pluto is profound. And they shift you. Oftentimes people will have a sort of a religious epiphany of some sort. They may lose faith, they may gain faith, they may find a shift in their direction, they may change their philosophy, they may, but it has that sort of quality about them. Somebody may just have a change of heart and decide they want to change their career completely, and they go off and do something that's always been their heart's passion. And when we look at the astrology chart, as I mentioned earlier, we can see that imprint, that sort of that signature of who they were supposed to be when they were younger, but they never went that way. They may have been guided by their parents or a high school counselor or by their spouse in some regard to do something different, or they may have had, mitigating circumstances that didn't provide them with the option of being able to do something different. And as a result of that, they were forced into this situation where it was very difficult, and they had to sort of resolve that. And this is what it's all about. It really is. And I think that when you look at Pluto through those kinds of eyes, you can see it as a great friend in many ways, because you're sort of being delivered to where you need to be at the right place and time, which I think is fascinating. I really love that. So I'm an optimistic astrologer, first of all. So I always try to find the silver lining in everyone who has a cloud. I always use that phrase, let's try to find that gold in that cloud, the silver in that cloud. And I'm very comfortable with that, because I think that when you find this position of Pluto, it does provide you with an opportunity to work with it. And as Hazel said so well, if you don't do this, Pluto will come along and get you, right, Hazel? I mean, it's just absolutely, it's going to keep tapping you on the shoulder.
What you're saying is absolutely right, Chris. Pluto is that force that will not let you go. You can't ignore it, and you can struggle with it, and keep beating your head on the wall, but Pluto's the wall that's not going to go away.
Right.
And as you said too, many people have epiphanies during their Pluto transits. They do change their whole lives. They change. They may have, not just like a religious change of heart, or you change a career, but they change the way they feel about themselves and the way they see about the world. Their issues, trust issues may change. Somebody they learn how to trust people. They learn how to I am a good person. I can go on and do whatever I want. People that may have not been educated decide to go back to school and get an education. There's just 1,000 things, and it's a force to be reckoned with. It's a force that can be scary. Pluto does have a bad rap because he's, the Lord of the Underworld, and he ruled Hades in mythology. But he's the energy is such a powerful force that's within each one of us that if we work with it, you can truly transform your life. Truly.
Yeah, I think the epiphany is another good word. A profound epiphany. Let's put those two together, and we'll get a really good summation of what Pluto can do for you. And it really does sort of guide you, because believe it or not, your astrology chart does it. I always refer to the astrology chart as the owner's manual for the individual. You can a professional astrologer such as myself or Hazel can look at a chart and say, this is who you are, this is where you'll go, and never have known you or never have met you. Oftentimes, I have clients from across the world who call in. I've never met them. All thing I know about them is their birth date, place, and time. And yet in that information, I can get enough about who they are. This is where astrology is almost magical science, divination tool. It gives you that ability to reach in there and see what's going on with this person. And when you find that out, we can act like a good therapist or a guide to help people discover their true potential. We all have potential, and we all have the ability to be somebody, to have a purpose. We all have a purpose. And if we can find that through this process of self-examination, through this deep looking inside, being self-aware, allows you to really live to your fullest potential. And that's what you really want. You want to be able to be all that you can be. I mean, I hate to keep using that phrase because it sounds like a cliche, but it really is accurate. So it's interesting.
It is accurate.
Now you refer to Pluto in your book. Hazel's you've written a great book called Astrology's Bad Boy, and I know there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek in that, but and we can laugh about it, and it is very comical, and you've got a great sense of humor. Your other book, Born on a Rotten Day, you have a series of books that are sort of like that, and I think it's very funny because ultimately we don't want to be too heavy about this. We do want to be able to be lighthearted and be able to use this and enter into it open-mindedly with a sense of acceptance and awareness. But that book is a very interesting look, and if anybody wants to understand what it takes to handle Pluto, this would be a great place to start. You know, it really would be a great place to start. And so I think it's interesting in that regard. But when you think of, you call him the bad boy of astrology and how to handle him, it's sort of like you've sort of written an owner's guide for Pluto. It's like when you figure out who your Pluto is, this is how you handle him, right?
Well, it's a very basic owner's guide for Pluto. It's Harness Astrology's Bad Boy.
Yeah.
And it tells how to awaken that inner energy and that inner force within yourself. And yes, I used humor in it. This one's a little deeper book than the
I think it has to be.
because they're all based on the sun signs.
Yeah.
But, excuse me.
Sure.
This book with Pluto tells people how it gives a guide, a short, succinct guide to where some issues might be working in your, either things that you've had from
childhood,
yeah. Or where the transit is now, right. And give some prompts and give some client stories to make it kind of interesting, because Pluto's a very heavy, a heavy character, and reading about him can be heavy, and I wanted it to be conversational. Right. And that's how we wrote the book.
Because, some of the value of astrology, I mean, any astrologer can read anything about Pluto and understand it, but if you're not well versed in astrology, you're not going to know what's going on. So it's important to be able to understand it through layman's terms. When you have layman's terms, you're able to do it effectively. And you're really, really good with that regard. So you really want to be able to understand it. When astrology is spoken in layman's terms, it works really well. Well, Hazel, we've run out of time. This has been a great conversation. It's fun to be able to connect like this via Skype. Skype is a fascinating technology, and to be able to connect like this across the planet is just amazing. I am thrilled to be able to do this. I feel like I'm in a spaceship up, and I'm talking down to Earth, or you're in a spaceship talking down to me on Earth. But anyway, my guest today has been Hazel Dixon-Cooper. She's written a fantastic new book called Astrology's Bad Boy, and we all know, any astrologer will tell you, astrology's bad boy is Pluto, but don't be put off by that. It's best to understand where Pluto is in your chart, your astrology chart, how it impacts you, what it can do for you, and how you can work with it to make your life better. So Hazel, it's been great having you on today. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch, and maybe we'll see you on my radio show as well. Actually, we won't see you there, but we'll hear you.
As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you too. Take care, Hazel. Be well.